into it if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, no worries.
Lovely. So I'm here with Martin Law, local filmmaker from Preston, and we are discussing your debut feature film, Reputation, which is set to have a digital release on the 28th of July. In addition to that, you've created several short films and also the Northwest Independent Film Festival, which opened this past June and is planned to continue annually right here in Preston. Thank you so much for taking the time out to meet with me today on behalf of Blog Preston. Is there anything I'd missed that you'd like to add?
No, no, that's covered a lot. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you so much for taking the time out, as I said. Because yeah, no, it's wonderful to be able to appreciate local talent and creatives and to kind of put a spotlight on these things. For myself, that's kind of what I cover at Blog Preston, talking about the creative side of things and arts and things like that, which needs to have more of a spotlight shone on it. And so having someone like yourself be able to join in and have a conversation with us so that we can really put that into focus, I think is really important for everyone that is here to inspire, to lead, and to yeah, kind of just show people what's possible. So
Exactly. I think Preston is no different really to any other city, in terms of there are plenty of people out there that are actually talented, creative people or whatever. And sometimes it's opportunity. So you mentioned the film festival. I created that because Preston didn't have one. And yeah, I think there was at least 30 people each day who came. So it's great to see people are actually interested in it. I've obviously made my debut feature film, which has screened a couple of times in Preston. So it screened at the Flower Bowl up in Brock. Is that where the Flower Bowl is? Like Gorstang or whatever?
like Broughton, Brock sort
Yeah,
of thing,
yeah.
yeah, towards Garstang.
So it is a bit far out from the city centre, but again, the fact that a local cinema wanted to support the film, and then Cinema at the Continental, which is like a little community where they show feature films. I did a little Q&A there. So yeah, it has shown a couple of times in Preston, but I'm delighted that it's now coming out for digital release, where anyone who has been interested but not been able to catch it before will be able to buy or rent or however it works. And hopefully it doesn't disappoint.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've been able to watch it. I've been very fortunate to be able to see it myself, not in a public space here in Preston, but as part of this. And I really enjoyed it, genuinely. I thought it was a fantastic story, really well told, really well put together. And obviously, as a lower, no budget kind of film, low budget, I know there was a lot that went on behind the scenes to get it made. But it really kind of is very effective in the story that it's telling and the way it's putting everything across. So we'll definitely dig a little bit more into that. But before we get into that, I'd love to go into the behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah.
I've been looking a little bit at kind of the process that you've gone into of making the film and the previous interactions you've had with Blog Preston and things like that. And you mentioned before that it took more than 10 years to actually make the movie. So obviously from idea to casting to everything else, a lot goes into making a movie, and certainly with low budget, it takes even longer. Now that you're on the other side of it, now that it's complete, in terms of the actual movie itself being complete, what's changed about that long road looking back? Because that's a long chunk of your life to have taken so much time out. What's changed, if
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah, no, it is crazy. Like, if I think about it, the amount of times, the amount of conversations I've had, the amount of times I've thought about this from, like you said, the conception to actually making it, it is crazy, right? You have got to have a bit of obsession in you, to because plenty of people, I went to university, studied film production, and most of the people who you kind of meet on these courses don't really go into film. They kind of fall into a regular job or just something else. Now, that's partly the issue because of the UK's film industry. We don't have a lot of money. Not that many British films get made. We've got very limited funding, limited opportunities, really. Other than servicing the American industry, which is what kind of the studios do, like Pinewood. You've got big blockbusters coming over to film in Pinewood because it works out cheaper for them. But where are the British films getting made? So we do have the BFI, which they are a charity. They do have to tick a few boxes. They've got the diversity standards. Now, this is a film set outside of London. It's set in the north. The north is definitely underrepresented on screen. But I was kind of just weighing it up and thought deep down, would it get funding through the BFI? And these applications and all of that, it takes such a long time. So because of how much time I'd already spent, it's like I just want to make it now. So what you do is you go back to the script. Like everyone wants to make films, right? It's like you write a script, everyone wants to get it made, but again, there's little funding, so you've got to be realistic with what can be achieved. So you start going through the script, you start looking at, okay, I can film that and that in the same location. So you start changing scenes, or you start actually removing characters and stuff. So one of the the biggest reason why it took so long, the development stage and the script writing stage, was because it was always written to be made rather than just writing a spec script and like, oh, I've written a sci-fi script. I hope it gets made. It's like be realistic with what you can achieve. But also myself and my two co-writers, we love these types of films, like small, gritty stories. So it was always about keeping that keeping that energy in the film, rather than making something heightened. That's what TV and some films are, aren't they? The heightened versions of reality. Soaps. It's heightened. It's supposed to have a feel of naturalism, but at the same time be a bigger thing. But I always have thought, actually, I'd rather keep as much of the reality as possible. So again, these are the types of films that I like. Dead Man's Shoes being a big influence. So yeah, it is a long slog making a film. And of course, over those 10 years development, you kind of real life gets in the way. You take regular jobs. Like I was doing different jobs and stuff, and yeah, you've got to make compromises. But I just know my passion, my ambition was always there, and I always knew it was gonna get through and make it. So spent the last obviously it's coming out now. It was filmed in October 23. So I would say that 2023 was a big year for me in terms of I made a short film, to kind of get me back into filmmaking because I hadn't really done a lot over the last few years. Made that short and then really focusing on the script and then started getting the ball rolling, getting the cast and crew together and making it. And honestly, there were times even during the shoot, like on day two of the shoot, I was a bit like, I'm not sure I can do this. It's tricky. It's not that enjoyable. Like the shoot itself is not that enjoyable because it's so stressful, right? But honestly, the post production is for me easily the most fun. Like when you start seeing it come together and getting some of the people on board. So, the obviously the editor comes on. He kind of brings his vision to it, but the sound editor is a different kind of thing. Like they can just improve things subtly, and it's crazy how much it can elevate it. And then the music, the score, all of that kind of thing is just. I kind of see it as a bit like, when someone renovates a house, it looks a mess, doesn't it? Until right at the last minute where they put the carpet down, and it's almost like that's what the score does. So when you see it come together, it makes it worth it. When you then do those screenings and you're seeing an audience watching it, now I'm getting the film out there, getting reviews and stuff. Obviously, critics' reviews are important and it's great, but yeah, I want to see those reviews from Joe Blogs and people who might have them same tastes as me. In terms of these social realism films, gritty, character driven, and yeah, I'm just excited now that it's coming out.
Lovely. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. And a lot of the things that you've just shared in terms of kind of like you've mentioned about kind of gathering a community together in terms of making the movie. So you had to get a sound editor in, you had to get an editor, obviously cast crew, everything else that happens. Even on this feature film, which is obviously a lower budget film than what you might see in the cinema typically, the credits at the end, it's a ton of different names. There's a lot of people scrolling by. It's a village to make the movie, right? And it's incredible to see so many people come together and for yourself to be able to get your vision across the line and the amount of people that contribute to that vision. And that ties in well and ties back to another aspect of getting the movie made and something that I know you've mentioned a couple of times previously. But again, I want to get more of a perspective of now at the other side of it about crowdfunding. So obviously to get this movie made in the first place, it took a lot of crowdfunding. You mentioned BFI is kind of like has its standards for how they can offer money to help out with a film and getting it funded. But otherwise, filmmakers have to be industrious and creative in terms of getting money together and being able to make a movie. So I know for yourself, you reached out to different businesses, reached out to individuals. And all of that was a process that was ongoing throughout the process of making the movie, right? Um, for you, what were the positives and the negatives of having to go through that process of crowdfunding to make a movie rather than having one person sign off and give you however much, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean there is, it is a bit of it was awkward, isn't it? Like asking anyone for money is awkward, right? And you do feel a bit of like shame almost of like, because it to an extent it's like begging, right? You're begging people to give you money for a creative project that they don't know anything about or like they don't need to know anything about. So yeah, it is very tricky. Like you said, I reached out to local businesses and stuff and trying to think outside the box really because you know if a local business gets their names in the credits or something, it's a bit of advertising for them, and is that then worth them putting in X amount of money? Yeah, no, it is very tough. And you mentioned like one person just signing a check and it's kind of handed over, and it's like, yeah, I think everyone that's the dream, just to be given a budget of like, I mean, BFI, BBC films, these are usually made between £2 and £5 million, right? So
Mhm.
these are big films, but when we then compare it to Hollywood, right? So if you've got an actual studio like Warner Brothers making a superhero film and it's a $200 million budget, that's kind of secured because it's coming out of their profits and everything. So it's like, it's an actual business. And that's the problem with the UK film industry, that there's not really that business mentality of you make a film, it then makes profit and you put in the profits back into your next film and it keeps going. So yeah, for me, as just one guy, independent filmmaker, you're starting from nothing. So again, that's one of the reasons why you try and keep the budget as low as possible so that it's lower risk. So, you mentioned it was an ongoing process because, yeah, after we filmed, I then did more crowdfunding, like a public crowdfunder, like a Kickstarter. It's through a website called Greenlit. And another positive of doing crowdfunding is that it's almost like a marketing tool, right? Because you're mentioning your film at that stage and people will then hopefully remember it. So like now the film's coming out, they might be like, "Oh, I remember seeing something about this like a couple of years ago." I mean, in a perfect world, it wouldn't have taken as long as it has done, but yeah, these things do happen. The main aspect of what you need to remember as an independent filmmaker is creative control. And if I'd have been given 2 to 5 million from the BFI or whoever, they might have wanted certain changes. Or like a big studio in America, Hollywood, that these they go through processes. I mean, you know, any film fan, even if you don't like kind of superhero movies and stuff, you'll have heard of Zack Schneider, the director, and the Schneider Cut. So he directed a film, and it was heavily edited by the studio. So he didn't get final cut. It was heavily edited. But then fans were like, "Oh, release the Schneider cut. We want to see what his original vision was." Blah blah blah. And that happens so much. I even read recently about American History X, which I actually think is a great film, right, as it is. But the director really hates the finished version that came out, and it's very different from what he wanted it to be. So yeah, I think we all want to make films because creative people want to tell stories and all that kind of stuff. And then you've got to be realistic with, okay, but it is an expensive art form where you do need all these people, and people's time costs money, and then locations, all these things cost money. So you've got to be realistic with it all. So you might have to lose some creative control. I didn't lose creative control, but I lost. But I wouldn't even say I lost because you're losing certain aspects of the script because you can't film them. You might have to cut down a scene or even remove a scene. So in a perfect world, you would have filmed it. But in a way, I think that you embrace the limitations, and I think that probably helps. So yeah, to answer the question, I think crowdfunding is something that I don't really like or want to do. It's a bit of a necessary evil in the sense of, you know, like I'm not made of money. I can't just fund my own films and stuff. So you've got to kind of beg, borrow, and steal, if you will. There was no stealing. I'd like to clarify that, but yeah, I think you know. you kind of have to just try every avenue, you know. So even after the film was made, still doing crowdfunding, still getting donations at that point. You know, I had a couple of really generous people who came in to back the film after they'd seen it and stuff. So after they'd seen some of the raw footage, it's a bit of a risk, you know, in terms of because a lot of the funds are spent after filming because you're paying people's invoices, you're paying the director of photography his bill, and that usually comes within 30 days of the shoot finishing. So it's like in a way I took a bit of a risk of like, oh, you know, not got all the money that I need to pay everyone, but like I can get more money afterwards and stuff. So yeah, it's the money side of things. I mean, no one likes talking money in general, right? It's a bit crass and stuff. It is a tough thing to really dissect. And yeah, it's just trying to find that balance between the creative side and the business side and making sure that it all can work together, you know? So now, as I said, I wouldn't want to do it again, that route. You know, hopefully getting my film out there and getting reviews and stuff. Someone might offer me a budget all in one to make a film, you know, hopefully that's the dream, I think. But as long as I don't have to make creative, you know, as long as I can keep creative control, that's the main thing. So the main thing is, I would say, to kind of summarize, is that the film itself should speak for itself, right? So the film, as a film that you might be able to revisit in 10 years' time on a streaming service, or someone in France might come across it in 30 years' time or something, or it's going to outlive me. Like that's magic for me. That's amazing. So the process of making the film, all the kind of trials and tribulations, all the kind of the you know the lack of sleep and all the horrible moments and everything, it's worth it, you know, because the film itself has been created, it's out into the world, and an audience can find it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. No, I really appreciate hearing that. And I think everything that you're saying with that, it really resonates. And I think in terms of the crowdfunding, obviously you pulled in a lot of different people to help and get there. And fair enough, as you said, no one likes talking money, but it is that kind of necessity that fuels the whole machine, right? For independent filmmakers or for the big box studios, regardless, it ends up being one of the things that's behind it all. But what I think as well is a beautiful aspect of that, at least, is it, like you've mentioned a couple of times now, everyone has a story to tell. Everyone wants to have their stories told. And by being able to be a small piece of that and maybe contributing some of the money and then seeing the finished product, it can really kind of give you a taste for that and make you a little bit more excited and hopefully inspire people to take their own creative leap and jump into that process.
Yeah, I
And
mean
so
that's
that,
the exactly. I completely agree with you. Like I think, you know, there are so many people who are out there who have probably written a script, or you know, let's say they've written prose and it's a novel, and it's like there are gatekeepers in the industry where they might have sent it to an agent or a producer or whoever. One person reads it and just doesn't even respond to an email, right? So then that writer might just kind of accept defeat, and just that piece of writing just sits as a PDF on their desktop, or even if it's printed, it's just in their drawer. And I genuinely believe that in the world there would be thousands and thousands of great scripts, great stories that just have not been given the time of day. And I think the way that technology is becoming more democratized, I think that's a great thing. You know, obviously there's the big debate about AI and all that kind of stuff, and it's going to take away jobs and all this. And I can see it from both sides completely. Right now, my personal opinion on that is that there are many positives, and it's going to allow people to actually make more things for cheaper. So, you know, the only thing really stopping a lot of people from going out and making films is money, because it does cost a lot of money. It's not just like, you know, an art form where you're just relying on yourself and you can get things out into the world. It's very much collaborative. But yeah, even you know, even with reputation, not necessarily being given money, but like saving money by getting locations for free, for example. So a few businesses in Preston, I'd like to give a shout out to Nippon, the Jiu-Jitsu club. Let us film there on a day. Great location for what we wanted it to be. Nanny Nancy's Cafe in Moonnook, lovely. Again, she was very really generous with her time. She even cooked a chili for the cast and crew on that day. It was just so generous. Um, John's garage on Wellington Road. So you've seen the film. So John is in the film. So he gave us the location for free. He gave us his time. He's in it as himself. It's crazy, but I think that's the beautiful thing. It's the community spirit of like people want to help out and get involved and yeah, like you said, the fact that the film will then be coming out, they can kind of be like they've got a story to tell because it's like, oh yeah, that was filmed here, or like we got involved with this, and yeah, me, I get emails all the time from people now as like a producer and stuff, and it's hard to not. I try my best to reply to everyone, and anyone who ever tells me they've made a film, I will always click on that link. Like I'm just curious, I want to see and unfortunately, not a lot of other people in the industry have that mentality. It's almost like I said, the gatekeeping. So, like some people, you need to get a script to them through an agent rather than just directly. Almost like having the agent is like the middleman, and it kind of gets rid of all the kind of the bad ones first. But I think, I think there's a lot of talented people in the world, and part of my job as a filmmaker, as a producer, is finding talented people, bringing them together. So, like this Reputation was a story that I've co-written with my friends Dean and Jordan, an idea that we spoke about for years. But yeah, I'm not arrogant to think that I could just write every great script. Like other people can write great scripts, and I want to read those scripts and hopefully try and get them made as well. So yeah, I love it when people get in touch with me, and I'm always open to reading more stuff and just yeah. If I think if you're a film fan, you just want to watch films. So even as a filmmaker, which is time consuming and stuff, I just want to watch other people's films. So hopefully, there are lots of filmmakers out there who want to watch mine, but also the general public and stuff. And if it can then lead to them to start feeling creative and want to make something because they can see, oh yeah, you don't need to make a big superhero film. You can make a small scale film about these characters. If it inspires someone else to make a film, I would absolutely love that.
I love it. You're putting yourself on the line there. I mean, you might get more emails and everything after this.
Yeah, cut that last bit out. Yeah.
Beautiful. You mentioned several businesses. You gave shout outs to different community and people that kind of like contributed time, space, and all these different things to it. I think that really goes hand in hand with this next question, just in terms of how important was it to have this film take place in Lancashire for you, both as the town that you hail from and the setting for the story? I mean, the story is about kind of, criminal activity and a friendship, a relationship, and things that kind of like spiral out of control. So it could potentially have been set in a lot of different places, but what was it that made it special for you, and yeah, Lancashire. Why Lancashire for you? How is that important?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think deep down, like you've hit the nail on the head there, that it's a universal story, right? Because these characters could be in Paris, even a bigger city, or it could be, a random remote place in Ecuador or somewhere, I think deep down it's about the characters, their relationship to each other. So you could move the characters to a different setting. I am proudly from Lancashire, and we just don't get a lot of films made in Lancashire that are set in Lancashire and stuff. So I remember years ago, I tried to kind of pitch the idea of a crime film set in the north, and this producer who was from Essex was like, "No, there's no audience for a northern film. Like, no one would want to watch that." And I just always thought it was quite a stupid thing to say because Coronation Street, for example, is, I believe, the most watched soap in the UK. Even like abroad, I think in Canada they watch it and stuff. So yeah, the idea that the accents or whatever it might be would put people off, I think is ridiculous. I think Lancashire has got a lot of beautiful scenery. So where it's been filmed in the Ribble Valley, so Accrington, Great Harwood, Clayton Le Moors. So we've set it in a fictional town called Dennings. We did film a bit of it in Preston, like I mentioned before. But again, those kind of locations could be in any of these kind of northern towns or anywhere, like you said, really. I mean, I guess it could be set anywhere. But yeah, I wanted to put Lancashire on film um, and just deep down make a film that I would love to watch. Like I call myself a cinephile. I'll watch anything wherever it's not like an accent's going to put me off. But yeah, I wanted to hear more northern accents on film. Um, obviously the lead character, Wes, is played by James Nelson Joyce, who was a Scouser. That didn't put me off. I kind of just thought, the backstory, which you don't need to actually shove down the audience's throat, but he might have moved to the Lancashire town when he was like 12 with his dad, and he's lived there since, for the last 20 years. He would still have his kind of native accent, but yeah, that's his home. And yeah, I think it is a story very much about the character Wes figuring out what is the most important things to him. So, at the start he mentions like this is my town, and it's kind of like obviously he's doing well dealing drugs and stuff, the criminal activity, but he thinks that's home. Now for him really, home is where his fiance and his baby are, right? So technically, because he talks about moving to Australia, for example, so that could then be home. But yeah, I wanted a small scale story, and as someone from Preston, Lancashire, I wanted to put Lancashire on the map. And there are plenty of people like we only have to go into the town centre in Preston, and you could come up with stories just based on what you see, right? People watching and stuff, and I think that can resonate with a lot of towns and cities. Um, but yeah, I really wanted to put Lancashire on the map. Um, Hopefully not in a negative way, but just to show that you know these real stories happen.
Hmm. I think watching it clearly doesn't feel any lesser because of it. Like purely the scening, it's the scenery, the setting, all of it adds to the value of the film. Looking at it, seeing the drone shots over housing estates and things like that, but also the more kind of scenic settings in the Ribble Valley and places like that. It definitely adds to the quality overall. And it feels like anything that you can see produced by the BBC. And that was kind of the thing that struck me a little bit, that it does feel like anything else that you might switch on and see from kind of like BBC, ITV, whatever. So I certainly, that producer from Essex was absolutely wrong. But yeah,
Yeah, no,
I think
100%. And again, the drone shots. A local, I think he lives in Chorley, actually. I'm not sure, but yeah, no, Lancashire-based photographer, drone photographer, videographer, called Frank Clark. Really generous guy. He did that for free for me. I reached out and said I was looking for s- s- drone shots of the terrace houses over Accrington, and he was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." So again, the generosity of people um, is amazing because I think that does add a bit of value to the film. Like you said there, and it gives that sense of the place, seeing all the terrace houses, because that's what happens. I mean, I live in a terrace house. There's nothing wrong with it at all. Like, but these houses are quite close together, right? It's not like when you see big American films where they've got these massive yards and they're all massive detached houses and stuff. Um, we are kind of all close together, and that's going to affect people in different ways, isn't it? Um, in Reputation, we'd actually touch on terrace houses a little bit. Again, I've done it in a subtle way, so it'll be interesting if people pick up on it. But it's all about the drugs going missing, which is kind of comes out later on in the film, and he thinks he hears someone in the loft. Terraced houses were built where you could literally go through all the houses because it's like a fire escape. So you could literally climb up in your loft and then get into next door's loft, and then so on through the attic. So you know, all of that stuff. That wouldn't have worked, would it, if this film was set in a swanky apartment in London, right? So, yeah, the locations add to the grittiness of the film, and I really think it's something that will appeal to a lot of people. So I'm excited that it's coming out, and I hope people give it a watch.
I definitely agree. Thank you so much. And I'm aware that you're running short on time. We're coming to the end of our allotted slot. But I just want to ask one last question before you go. You mentioned previously to Blog Preston that you thought the filming process would be the most difficult aspect of making an indie film, but it turns out it's everything that comes after. Now that it's coming to digital, do you feel like you're kind of crossing the finish line as far as reputation is concerned? And is there anything else on the horizon for you?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Like it's worth it. Like now, it feels like yeah. I mean, obviously, a distribution company have picked up the film. They're doing a lot of work behind the scenes. They reach out to a publicity company who are doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So it's not just me anymore, which is what it was, when I obviously gave that interview with Bob Preston, and that is how I felt. So, filmed in October 23, the bulk of it. We then did an extra half day of filming in January 24. It was fully finished to what you've seen by like June 24. So from June 24 to obviously July 25 was that process of trying to get the film out there. So me directly contacting distribution companies, critics, all these kind of things to try and just get some sort of word about the film out there. But yeah, as we've said before, it's very much a collaborative thing. One person can't do all of this. Um, so yeah, I think finding the distribution company who were passionate about the film, could see the value in it and everything, definitely makes it worthwhile. And like I said, even this now is surreal, being interviewed and having a press junket, and we got a review in the Guardian early today, so that's amazing, right? So all of this stuff definitely makes it all worth it. And I've obviously learned a lot from the experience at every stage. So the pre-production, production, post-production, and then even distribution, marketing, all of that kind of stuff. So I do have a script that is almost ready to go. Again, a little bit. I'm in the position of trying to find investors and stuff. Hopefully that it makes it easier though, having my first film out to rent on Apple TV and Sky Store, and having reviews from The Guardian and whoever to say this is what my first film did with a bigger budget. This is now what my goals are and what I project for that. But yeah, I think, I touched on it before, the creative side and the business side. I do think that there's a lot of crossover, and that you have to play the game, you have to be aware of it, and you have to manage it. So, two very different roles, directing, producing. I did both. And I think, just the type of person I am, I would want to continue doing both. But if I can get more help at an earlier stage, so, the distribution company that I've got now, are happy to work with me again. So that does actually take a lot of weight off my shoulders, because you kind of know, okay, so the next film is definitely going to get released, and I know that it's going to have the publicity company doing a lot of work as well. So yeah, I think it's still an ongoing process, but I think I've got through those enjoyable moments, and yeah, I'm now hopefully going down the slide, if you will. And yeah, I thank everyone who's supporting the film, and anyone who wants to support me as a filmmaker and stuff, get in touch, like, whether that's giving me your time to work on another film. And, again, I think that a lot of people can help each other out. So it's not just like I just want people to give me things or whatever. I would want to give them something back. So there are a lot of filmmakers out there who we could actually just work on each other's films. So no one's getting paid for their time, because you're just giving your time to each other. If we can find ways to make films, more films could be made for less. If more people are willing to do, more for less. And obviously we live in a capitalist world where people need money to eat and stuff. I get that completely, but no one needs to be earning £500 a day, really, do they? So let's just make films, let's just tell stories, let's create art. And yeah, in a way, I'm pleased I've had to go through this whole process, because I can learn from it. And you know it's an experience that even might inspire another idea for me, whether it's like a direct inspirational thing like a film about a filmmaker or whatever, or it leads to something else. But yeah, got a new film currently in pre-production, still sorting out casting and um, sorting out finances and stuff. But yeah, I feel a lot more confident because of the experience I've gone through with Reputation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Martin Law.